The energy around Pittsburgh felt completely differente after this latest matchup, and anyone who watched the Steelers take the field saw a defense playing with a level of urgency that had been missing for weeks. It was like the entire unit walked in determined to erase the embarrassment the Bengals handed them not so long ago, and instead of just talking about cleaning things up, they actually delivered. You could sense it from the opening snap, the way the players attacked the ball, the way the communication clicked, the way every movement felt intentional instead of reactive. What really jumped out wasn't just the big plays or the pick-six celebrations, but how the scheme itself looked transformed, like the coaching staff finally threw out the old script and said, "All right, enough is enough. Let's rebuild this thing from the ground up." What made this so striking was how different the approach looked compared to that disaster in Cincinnati. There the Steelers looked stuck in quicksand, slow to adjust, stuck repeating the same mistakes as Chase, and Higgins tore up the middle of the field. This time, though, they flooded the field with speed, relying less on the heavier bodies up front and more on outside linebackers who could close space before the Bengals even recognized the opening. The middle of the field, which had been a gaping wound the last time these two teams met, tightened up dramatically. It was not perfect, far from it, but it went from being a highway with no tolls to at least a controlled space where throws required precision rather than being freebies. You could see veterans and younger players reacting differently, flipping their hips quicker, crashing down harder, communicating with a level of confidence that had disappeared a month earlier. Even Joe Flacco, who had picked them apart before, found himself sliding around in the pocket instead of sitting comfortably and firing darts. He was forced to roll out, forced to reset his feet, forced to throw across his body, which is exactly what this defense needed to do to him. They did not rack up a mountain of sacks, but they made him uncomfortable, and sometimes that matters more than the stat sheet. The players were quick to point out after the game that this wasn't just one of those vague, we prepare better situations. They actually broke down what changed, and their descriptions matched what everyone watching could see. They talked about how the staff challenged them to reclaim their identity, to get back to playing the brand of football the city expects. That meant embracing speed, unpredictability, and aggression, not the stiff, predictable setups that allowed Cincinnati to read their intentions like a street sign. Nick Herbig, among others, explained that this was about rediscovering that old-school sense of Steelers football, the physical edge mixed with disciplined execution. He admitted they didn't have every turnover they wanted, but when two defensive scores hit the board, that sparks a whole different momentum. To him, that was the moment things felt right again, that the group was leaning on its roots instead of scrambling to cover its flaws. And part of returning to those roots meant accepting that adjustments cannot be just about the whiteboard. Sometimes personnel has to change. Sometimes players who have been struggling simply have to be replaced. Every sport works like that, and the defense finally reached the point where the staff was willing to admit it openly. The safety group, in particular, had been underperforming for weeks, and something had to shift. One change came through injury, with Deshaun Elliott forced out, but that opened the door for a new alignment that gave Jalen Ramsey a chance to roam inside more consistently, and he has looked comfortable and sharp there. A different level of impact, a different level of anticipation. Then came the more dramatic move, cutting Juan Thornhill after his struggles kept mounting. That decision looked bold on the surface, but the way Kyle Duggar stepped in made it feel like destiny. Duggar played with a spark like someone who had been waiting for the chance to prove he should have been starting all along. He showed range, physicality, and timing, and that pick six was a statement. It was the kind of play that immediately sets the tone for the rest of the unit. The cornerback situation shifted too. With Darius Slay sidelined due to a concussion, there was a sense of uncertainty, but it actually cleared the runway for James Pierre to showcase the momentum he had been building in smaller doses. His numbers had been solid, but the sample size was tiny. This time the load was real, and he rose to it beautifully. His tackling, his closing speed, his instincts on the ball, everything aligned. When a player battles for years to carve out his place, these are the moments that define whether he stays just a depth piece or blossoms into something more. Pierre took that opportunity and ran with it. Even the linebackers fed off that energy. Patrick Queen, in particular, looked like someone possessed, flying to the ball with purpose. On multiple plays, you saw him and Pierre crash together at the exact moment, both bringing full force, both making it clear they were not going to let Cincinnati control the rhythm. That combination of recognition and violence was something the defense had been missing. The coaching staff deserves credit for this transformation too, but now the challenge is consistency. The Steelers have had this pattern all season where a major embarrassment lights the fuse. They respond with creativity and emotion, and then the next week they slip back into predictable modes. They cannot afford to do that again, especially with Chicago coming up sporting a record no one expected 2 months ago. If the defense wants to convince people this was more than a one-week redemption arc, the players who stood out here, especially Duggar and Pierre, need to deliver performances with staying power. There's no guarantee the same scheme will work the same way next weekend, and it cannot simply be copied and pasted. The coaches will have to resist the urge to repeat the plan without adjusting it to a completely different opponent. This league punishes predictability, and the Steelers finally proved they can break their usual pattern. That means they cannot drift back into old habits now. The conversation around the team naturally shifted toward the offense after the game, especially with the sudden chaos at quarterback. The contrast between Mason Rudolph and Aaron Rodgers could not have been more obvious, and it went way beyond simple box score numbers. What played out on the field showed two quarterbacks operating with completely different rhythms and instincts, and the offensive line reacted accordingly. You could almost feel the energy shift when Rudolph stepped in, like the linemen suddenly understood exactly where they needed to anchor, exactly where the pocket would form, and exactly how long they had to hold their blocks. That kind of predictability might sound boring, but for offensive linemen, it is everything. When the passer stays centered, trusts the structure, and does not drift into danger, the entire group looks competent. That is exactly what happened. Rodgers, on the other hand, had been playing with frantic feet for weeks. You could see the hesitation every time he caught the snap, the way he drifted into pressure instead of stepping up, the way he tried to play like a younger version of himself. Even when the protection held, he moved as if it had already collapsed, and that created openings for the Bengals to tee off on him. You could tell Cincinnati studied this on film because they kept crashing toward his legs, betting that even minor contact would shake him. The plan worked. He was hit repeatedly, pushed off balance, and forced into awkward throws. There was no chance for the offense to build rhythm when every dropback became a scramble drill before the play even developed. Rudolph's approach was the exact opposite. He stayed upright, squared himself to the defense, and made quick decisions without panicking. Watching him operate almost felt like going back to the basics, but in a good way, the kind of football where timing and structure matter more than athletic improvisation. He barely moved from his spot, and because of that, the line could dictate the engagement. They could hold their angles, redirect defenders, and keep the pocket clean. If you saw the replay, it was almost surreal to realize he did not take a single real shot. He said after the game he was barely touched, and it looked completely believable. Against a division rival known for bringing heavy pressure, that is not just unusual, it is borderline stunning. This opened up opportunities not only for the passing game, but also for the ground attack. When the offensive line feels confident that they can protect, they often carry that same confidence into run blocking. Holes formed quicker, lanes developed with more clarity, and the backs could hit the second level without dancing sideways. Even if the run stats did not explode off the page, the consistency was there, the sense that the offense was finally moving with direction instead of stumbling into desperation. But the bigger story is what this means going into the next stretch of the season. Rodgers' wrist injury complicates everything. A fracture on the non-throwing side might not sound severe on the surface, but any quarterback dealing with pain in either wrist has to adjust nearly every part of their motion, from taking snaps to handing off to absorbing contact. It is nearly impossible to imagine the team risking further damage, especially on the road in Chicago. That opens the door wide for Rudolph, and the timing could not be more critical. The staff now has proof that the offense can look functional and even confident when he is in control, and that alone shifts the dynamic in team meetings and game planning. The interesting part is that this situation feels eerily similar to what happened late in the previous season, when Rudolph stepped in and provided the exact type of stability the offense desperately needed. He was not trying to be flashy, he was not trying to take over the game, he just did his job, trusted the system, and let the playmakers work. That is all the team needed back then, and it might be all they need right now. His presence smooths out the rough edges of a group that has been battling identity issues all year. There's also the reality that the defense's resurgence pairs perfectly with a quarterback who does not put them in dangerous positions. When the offense controls the ball, avoids reckless risks, and prevents unnecessary sacks, the defense can stay fresh and aggressive instead of constantly bailing out bad field position. What happened against Cincinnati illustrated exactly how complementary football is supposed to look. The defense scored, the offense sustained drives, and the momentum never shifted out of Pittsburgh's hands. They dictated the entire flow of the afternoon. Now, the challenge is carrying that into a stadium where Chicago has turned into a surprisingly tough opponent. Their record might shock people who stopped paying attention early in the year, but the truth is they have built an identity based on resilience and high-effort performances. Walking in there with a predictable and stale approach would be a mistake the Steelers cannot afford. The staff has to build off the creativity and flexibility they displayed against the Bengals, not retreat back to the old ways that got them embarrassed before. The players know this too. You could hear it in their voices after the game, the sense that they understand the bar they set for themselves. If they slip now, it will not be due to lack of talent, but due to losing that urgency. Rudolph himself carries a quiet confidence that seems to calm the entire roster. He does not need a spotlight or a grand announcement. He just steps in, operates the offense, and respects the flow of the game. When the team huddled around him, there's a noticeable shift, like everyone felt the temperature drop a few degrees and the chaos settle. Leadership comes in different forms, and sometimes it is the guy who simply brings order to the chaos who ends up strengthening the entire operation. At this point, the question isn't about comparing resumes or debating who has the better long-term profile. It is about fit and momentum. If the offense functions better with a quarterback who stays within the structure, the decision almost makes itself. The coaches will not say it publicly, and the players will not throw anyone under the bus, but everyone inside that locker room felt the difference. The huddle looks sharper. The exchange is cleaner. The decisions faster. The mistakes fewer. That matters. And now, after a day that reminded the city what Steelers football can look like when both sides of the ball sync up, the responsibilities shift to the staff and players to reinforce that foundation. They cannot rely on emotional bounce backs. They cannot wait for humiliation to spark improvement. They have to build from this win like professionals, carry the lessons forward, and prove that this version of the team is not temporary. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. An unexpected ripple rushed through the NFL world as whispers began to circulate about an unprecedented decision. The league has reportedly canceled the highly anticipated Steelers-Bengals matchup. Though no official statement has been released, insiders suggest that something far outside triggered the move, leaving executives, players, and fans in a state of disbelief. The news surfaced quietly at first. A low-volume murmur traded between team personnel and league staffers. But within hours, it grew into a full-blown storm of speculation. Was it a logistical failure? A sudden operational concern? Something tied to field conditions, travel complications, or an unexpected dispute behind closed doors? No one seems ready to speak on record. Yet those close to both organizations insist that the decision came swiftly and caught even seasoned veterans off guard. Inside team facilities, reactions reportedly range from confusion to frustration. Players from both sides were said to be preparing normally when the word spread, "Por Bixo dos Panos," delivered in abrupt messages and hurried hallway conversations. Coaches attempted to maintain focus, But multiple sources describe an atmosphere thick with uncertainty, as if something significant had happened that no one could fully explain. Around the league, the cancellation ignited instant debate. Some analysts claim the issue must involve a rare operational breakdown, something serious enough for the NFL to step in. Others believe there may be disagreements brewing between key decision-makers, the type of conflict the league typically keeps far from the public eye. A few more imaginative voices even suggested that the NFL might be testing new protocols, though none could point to concrete evidence. Meanwhile, fans of the Steelers and Bengals have flooded forums and social channels with theories of their own. Many expressed disbelief. After all, meetings between these two rivals rarely pass without intensity, emotion, and storylines ready to deaden our qualquer conversa esportiva. That such a matchup could be wiped off the schedule without warning only deepens the mystery. For now, the league remains silent, and every unanswered question fuels yet another rumor. Whatever the real reason behind the cancellation, one thing is clear. The NFL community is bracing for an explanation, and until it arrives, the whispers will only grow louder. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.